Hello everybody and welcome back to Hellbound Garage. Today we're going to continue working on the Datsun. Well, in my case, I've already been working on the Datsun, which is probably why I look dirty and tired. I figured out some things and just went to town putting things back on the Datsun, and it wasn't until I was getting ready to put these front tires back on the Datsun that I realized I should have been videoing all of it. So let me go through what I've done since the last video. As you can tell back there, got rear tires on. So the rear is all buttoned up, minus two little things. And surprisingly enough, I already figured out one of them, but I'm not taking the wheels off just because I have a time crunch that I need to adhere to, and that's just going to slow things down. So I'll get back to it. It's not very important, I guess. And if it doesn't get done right away, not the end of the world. So let me go over here and grab this guy. So this is the current list of things that need to be addressed so far as I put the car back together. And the thing that I've already figured out was the parking brake pins at the caliper. Now, what those are is they're literally the e-brake is cable driven, and there are pins that are attached to hooks on the rear calipers that operate the rear emergency brakes. Just the emergency brakes. Wow, I'm tired. Anyways, and I grabbed one pin that I thought was the right one, and I couldn't find the second one. The pin that I did have was super tight, and I was scratching my head because I knew I had both pins at one time. But anyways, as I progressed through other things with the car, I managed to find the actual right pins. The problem is with this car, I've taken it apart a couple of different times. I've revised things a couple of different times at this point. And what has happened is let me go over here. I have a bunch of these guys. So they're really convenient. You never really misplace what bolts go where. But at the same time, you can end up with a couple different bags depending on how you do things. Well, ran into one of those cases. I have 4 bags of brake line bolts in pieces, and grabbed the wrong bag. So there's that. The other things on the list are bleed the brakes, which I can't do because the master cylinder is not in place. We have the steering knuckle issue that I actually have a solution for and have already implemented. And then I have this front brake line coilover clip problem. So that's a good segue into showing you what I've done with the fronts, and that way I can get these front wheels back on and get the car back down on the ground. Yeah! Even if it's temporary, it's still back on the ground. Progress. So, focus here. So I went through and I put the brake lines in place that I needed to have. One of them was just temporarily in place, but I ran into a problem, and that is when I painted the engine bay, I didn't tape off all the threads. Well, go figure, the paint got into the threads and made it really hard to get a bolt back in. So I borrowed this guy from AutoZone. Let me show you what this is, just in case you've never seen it before. So this is, a thread restorer set that is for use by rental at AutoZone. You probably can get it at O'Reilly's or Advance. And unlike a normal tap set that's kind of like a triangle shape that burrows its way into a hole and creating threads, this is looks just like a normal bolt, rather than it's got the edge to clear out the metal as it's making its way through the threads that are already there. It's really good for like engine rebuild, so you can get all grime and gunk out of the threads before you put in new bolts. But it also works for paint. So ran that through all those brackets, and we got everything all bolted up. You will notice the Willwood master cylinder, and that is because of the rear disc brakes and the larger front brakes. The brakes were really squishy even after a larger master cylinder, so that's the solution for that. With the front suspension setup, I do have braided lines that I had made for me. Those are all installed. They're a nice piece. They definitely weren't exactly what I was looking for, but they work. And because I bought them, I'm not going to replace them until they fail. Now, on to my knuckle problem. So my steering knuckles didn't seat with the Techno Toy Tuning control arms, and I was scratching my head, as I said in the last video on the Datsun, and I really didn't know what to do. Part of me was gonna just grind down the castle nut to make it so it clearanced and I could get a cotter pin in the hole. Part of me was gonna do that to the knuckle itself. Neither one of them I wanted to do because that's more material away from the parts, making it a little less safe. Well, I talked to my dad, who he's been an engineer his whole life. He works for manufacturing, he does welding. If anybody knows when it comes to structure or machining, he's gonna be the guy to know about it. And talking to him, he's like, why not just drill new holes for the cotter pins? I'm like, that works. So that's what I did. I found a spot in the castle nut 90 degrees away from the existing holes and drilled straight through, put a cotter pin through, and she's good now. So that is my solution. Do I recommend this to everybody? Probably not. Your parts should fit. The manufacturer should design them to an OE spec or better, and they should be perfect. I don't know what this problem was, but we're gonna roll with it, and if it fails, then I'll figure out a new solution at that point. But with the way it's tightened, the way the cotter pin's in there, the amount of meat that the nut has on top of the knuckle, I don't think I'm gonna have a problem unless it's something related to another piece of the control arm. So that pretty much catches you up with everything that I've done on the Datsun to this point. And now I'm at the point where I get to put this guy back on the front. And let me show you here. This is what I got going on for my wheels and tires. The wheel is a Diamond Racing steel wheel, D-window style. It's a 16 by 10. I don't remember the offset. I had them custom ordered. They took forever to get. It was still the cheapest option to get this size with this offset at the time, which is why I bought them, even though it took a while. They were moving facilities during the time frame that I had custom ordered these wheels. So instead of taking 3 or 4 weeks like they should have, I think they took like 6 to 8. Don't remember, don't care. They are going to need to be repainted because the same gravel road that took off paint from everything else, well, it chipped the paint on the wheels. So good thing is they're a steel wheel. You can sand them down, paint them, no problem. The tires, Toyo Proxies, 245, 45, 16. Now, come on, focus. All right. If these look similar and you're well aware of Datsuns out in existence, you may see this wheel and tire setup maybe slightly different as what's on Skillard's Datsun. And that's because, well, I took his specs from the wheel, so oops. They looked really good. I liked them the way the flares were and everything else. So that's where those came from. Now, these aren't your typical Proxies because, you know, they don't have the crazy tread pattern on them. And that's because Proxies have a couple of different grades of tire or performance. These are the lesser grade performance variants of the Proxies, and that is because when I ordered these, I still lived in Illinois. I got a smoking deal on them through the dealership that I worked at, but that wasn't the real reason. The real reason is I wanted Proxies, but I didn't want them to get tore up by the roads in the area that I lived in. the roads are super terrible where I lived at in Illinois, and if I got the better versions of the Proxies or like R888s, they would have been chewing up in no time at all, especially if the alignment was off or anything, and gravel roads. So I went with the lesser. These are stickers, believe it or not. They still have, I don't know if you can see it here. There's still the sticker right there. So they really haven't been driven on that much. Pretty sad. But anyways, that's enough talking. Let me get these guys on here. That way I can get this thing lowered to the ground and have my jack stands freed up for the next project. That'll be in another video. And then we can move on to the next thing that I want to get done on the Datsun in this video.
In my veins, I've been driving this train. Years in this lane, there's no stopping this flame. Cause I came to the game and I changed it to play how I like, rearranged it to my own domain. Yeah, I got what it takes, made lots of mistakes, taking shots, skipping breaks, feeling lost, feeling great, popping off, singing straight, never stopped, never changed. All the squad here to play, and I've got something to say, yeah. I work hard each and every day, I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no, I push play. I won't stop till I make a change. I withdraw on the things I make. I turn flaws into flawless traits. I build tall, never capped in space. I won't stop till I hear him say, oh, oh, la 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 la, la 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 la, oh, oh, and I'm up again. I got
it's back down on the ground, and I always forget just how little this car really is. Just because it's always on jack stands, and it's always on a rotisserie, and it's always being worked on, and never driven, and never enjoyed. As you saw in the video, the height of the Datsun was still at a sketchy level, where I would have had to use a relatively big block on top of my jack in order to lower the front side of the car. So instead of doing that, we tested out the radiator support that I built and intended for it to be a jack point on this car. Well, with a tow strap and an engine stand, we proved that it can at least hold the front without the motor. So that's good news. I've also jumped on it to try and settle the suspension. It didn't really work because it's a stiff suspension, but overall, that's a success. And a weird serviceability problem with this car that I'm going to fix in the future is in regards to the back end and the dual exhaust. Don't mind the exhaust as it sits because it's not hooked up or anything, but that midpoint there on the diff, you know, you're supposed to be able to use that as like a jack point on the car. I didn't realize that when I had the dual exhaust made that was going to make that a real pain in the butt. Not only can you not really get a jack in there between the two pipes, when the car is lowered to ride height, you can't actually get the jack out from underneath it without blocks, which is typical of lowered cars, but add in the fact that that's a real pain to get between the exhausts, and it just becomes a nightmare. So serviceability wise, it's definitely something that I'm going to have to fix in the future. Oh, and that spot on the ground, it bugged me too, if you saw it in the video. So I checked it, and it's the internal frame coating that leaked out when I was doing that whole thing. So now that the Datsun's back on the ground, the next thing I really wanted to get into just didn't make sense to put in this video. So that's going to be on the next one. But I feel like we need to do a little bit more on the car before I wrap up this video. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to finish off putting the brake system in place and getting that all sealed so that there's no chances of anything getting in the lines before we actually get the lines bled. This is a remanufactured 280Z brake booster. Now there are a couple important things on this. One, the paint was something I did If you are coming from states where you don't have to deal with a whole lot of humidity and then you come to new ones, realize that the parts in those areas aren't coated. So you bring them to somewhere in the Rust Belt or the Midwest and everything starts to rust. So I ended up having to hit this with a wire wheel and put some paint on it. That way it stopped rusting, because the last thing you're gonna have to do is replace one of these because it rusted out. Anyways, the two important parts on this brake booster, it's gonna be this adapter here. A lot of people get rid of this, and you don't want to do that because they're pretty much impossible to find. The other thing is gonna be this guy, this clevis. I made the mistake of getting rid of this or turning this in with the brake booster when I turned it in for a core, and yeah, new ones don't come with these clevises, so make sure you have both of those parts for this before you go and turn it in as a core if you need to, as part of the exchange program at most auto parts stores. Alright, the second part to finish off the brake system is going to be this master cylinder. Now this looks like a factory 280Z master cylinder because it does have the standard reservoirs on it that were transferred from the original when I replaced it on this car. But this is actually a 7/8 master cylinder from a 280ZX. Now this will, along with the proportioning valve that's already in the car, these two things are really what make it so your upgraded brakes work properly and you don't get that real spongy, squishy pedal feeling. So let's go ahead and get both of these parts installed in the car. Alright, there you have it. One installed master cylinder, one installed brake booster attached to our custom lines down to our proportioning valve that goes off to the rest of the brake system. Now I don't have to worry about any dust, grit, dirt, whatever getting into the brake lines and causing a problem further down the line. You did probably see that this guy right here came in handy again. At some point I stripped out a thread on the brake booster. Not entirely sure when I did that, but thanks to the thread restorer kit, managed to get both the nut and the bolt taken care of, and it went on without any problems afterwards. So yeah, that is going to do it for this video. Now that I feel a little bit better about the brake system being all sealed off, I think I'm going to end the video here. So thank you for watching, thank you for your support, until the next one. Do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes.